back to part 18 of our Firebase real-time chat app series. In this part, we're going to be looking at the profile, dark mode support, and more interestingly, location messages. So I wasn't planning on doing location messages, but I was going through the code this morning and I have some extra energy, so I figured why not. So we're going to get started by opening up our project and we're going to jump straight into it. So first things first, I deleted the app from our simulator. So let's go ahead and pick a sim, hit Command R to build and run, and let's take care of dark mode first and foremost. And the reason I say that is because actually our app already supports dark mode in the way that we have built it. So I want to show you guys what that means. And I intentionally made a dark mode error, and I want to show you guys that as well. So let this load up here. Hopefully it doesn't take too long. There it goes. So what we're going to do to put our simulator in dark mode is hit Command-Shift-H on the simulator to go home, go to your settings. You want to go to developer and flip on this switch. And then we can close this, and let's reopen our app. Notice that our location, rather our login screen, is not dark mode supportive. The background is white. So let's start there and see why it's not dark mode compliant. So if we just search for the color white in Login View Controller, you'll notice that we use it in a few places. And the most important one we use it in is the background color of the view. So all you need to do is change this to the system background color. And I want to talk about this for a little bit, what this means. It was kind of obvious what it means, but this is something new that Apple introduced in iOS 13. It's called a semantic color palette, and it's capable of basically figuring out whatever theme the device is in. The colors will adapt for you, so you don't have to do things like if dark mode, do this, else light mode, do this. So you always want to make sure you are using colors that are supportive via the semantic color palette. So if we search for white again here, we notice that, what is this thing here? This thing is a text field, and we have a background color. So what I would change this one to is system, let's do system secondary. I think it's called secondary system actually. And we want system secondary background. And we're gonna do this for the other field as well, for password. And then what other colors do we have? We can leave this for the button since the background color is blue. And do we have white anywhere else in here? I don't think we do, other than that. So go ahead and hit Command R and let's see what this looks like. So it's building, and much better. So now we have our contrast between the text fields, the background color is appropriate. The Google button, we can't really do too much about this guy since that's what Google makes it look like, and that's kind of their brand outline. But we can certainly control the things around it. It's looking much better. Let's take a look at registration. We'll need to go here and do this update for the registration view controller as well. I think it's called register view controller. Search for white and go ahead and update this guy to be secondary system background for the field. And you want to do that for this one as well. Also this one. And finally this field. And then we have a register button we can leave as is. Make the background color here system background color. Go ahead and hit Command R. So a good thing to note is if you understand these kind of paradigms of semantic colors, when you first start building your app, everything will just work as is. Apple did a very good job with the color palette, so then you don't have to retroactively go back and change all this stuff. But of course, in your older apps, you might have to. So it looks like our login and our registration are looking good. So let's go ahead and log in to Joe's account here. And once we sign in, I don't know if we were supposed to have a conversation, but it looks like our colors here are looking good too. There it goes. So not sure why that happened. Thought we fixed that already. We'll take a look in a bit. But this is looking good. If we tap into a conversation, you'll notice that this is all looking good already. So this is what I meant by saying the majority of our app is already dark mode compliant. I think we purposely set the background of this to be white. So let's go to the new conversation view controller. And let's go ahead and fix those colors. So wherever we used white, so here for the background, we want to change this to be system background. And go ahead and hit Command R. Let's try that one more time. And cool, looking good, looking good. Let's search for, what user am I signed in with? Okay, I'm signed in with Joe, so let me search for the other user. Our cell's looking good too. We can select the user, it goes into the existing conversation. Notice our action sheet and all this good stuff is totally dark mode compliant. And I don't know about you guys, but I'm a really big fan of dark mode. I even like to do my development in dark mode. I'll later switch it to light because I know the majority of people do use light mode. So, but this is looking pretty good. And that's basically all we need to do for compliance with dark mode. And I keep saying compliance just because I like to think of it that way. It's really support. But you really should think about dark mode, especially in what, 2020 with iOS 14 coming out in about a week. So very important. So that said, let's take a look at some location messages. And we'll do the profile as well. The profile will just entail us caching this image and also showing the user's name here. We don't really have too much other profile info, but I'll talk through how you can add it if you desire that. So the first thing we want to do to support location messages, if we command click into the kind, and we scroll down here and look for location, you'll notice that a location takes a location item. And similar to a media item, it's a protocol, if I'm not mistaken. And this protocol basically wants a location, and it also wants a size. So we need to go back to our chat view controller, and we're going to create a struct that conforms basically exactly how this media item thing is built. So I'm going to say location is a location item, and it'll give us an error over here, and we'll be lazy and click this and hit fix to bring in those stubbed properties. And now we just want to allow the user to basically send a location message. So what I'm going to do, let's see why this is complaining. This is complaining because we're using CL location, which is a part of a framework that Apple has called core location. So you want to make sure you come up here and import core location, and this error should go away like that. But anyways, what I was saying is what we want to make sure we can let the user do is when they're in a chat and they hit this, we want to add a new option here to allow them to send a location. So let's go ahead and, we want to search for audio to get to that action sheet. Here is where that action sheet is presented when the plus button is tapped. Go ahead and hit copy and paste to add one more entry. We are going to add location. And then we're going to create a function down here. And we're going to say present location picker. And of course we need to build a location picker, but we'll do that in a sec. And make sure you do weak self in here so we don't cause a memory leak. And you can say present location picker. And basically in here, we're going to present a controller that shows a map, and the user can tap anywhere in that map, and we're going to hand back the coordinates to this controller, and that will be what we are going to enter in the database. So longitude and latitude, and then conversely, we can use the longitude and latitude to actually render out a little map message. So let's go create that location picker. Should be fairly straightforward. So we are going to right-click this and do a new file. So someone asked a good question in the comments of what's the difference between a Swift file if we did this as opposed to doing a Cocoa Touch class. There's in fact no difference. These are essentially just templates if we go back to this, and the Swift file will literally give you a Swift file with nothing in it. And if you do a Cocoa Touch class, it gives you a Swift file, assuming it's Swift and not Objective-C, but it fills out the subclass with, or the superclass for whatever subclass you're making. That's the only difference. Really, you could just type it in yourself, and I personally actually do that quite often. So we're going to create our own view controller. So it's going to be a subclass of a view controller, and we're going to call it location picker view controller. We're going to leave this unchecked as we'll do our UI programmatically. go ahead and hit enter twice to create it. And let's add some things in here before we go back to the other controller to use it. The first thing we're going to want to do in here is import two frameworks. First one is core location, and the next one is mapkit. And as we saw, core location has the location-based types in it, which is why we need it. Mapkit has a map, as the name implies. The next thing we want to do is specify a map. So we're going to say a map is going to be an mkmap view. And in here, we're going to, again, say a map is a mkmap view. And we're going to say map, or we can just return the map rather in here. And let's see, what else do we want? We want to add this as a subview, like so. We want to set its frame for the entirety of the screen. And we also want a completion handler off here, similar to what we do in other controllers, specifically the new conversation controller. And this is going to hand back to the caller a CL location. Well, I guess it's going to hand back, let's say, it's going to hand back coordinates actually. So I believe they are CL2D location, or 2D coordinates. CL2D location coordinates. That's what I was going for. And this whole thing will return void. Now we're also going to wrap this whole thing in parentheses and put a question mark there for optionality. And what else do we want? We also want a way for the user to be able to tap on the map. And basically we want to drop a pin there so they can visualize what location they're going to send. And we also want to show maybe a save button or send button, which will, once they've selected the location, it'll actually commit it, because we don't want them to accidentally tap on the map and for that location to be sent. So what I'm going to do in here is a navigation item, and we're going to add a right bar button item, and it's going to be a UI bar button item with a title, which is going to be send, and the style will be done. Whoops. Target will be self, and action will be a selector, and it's going to be send button tapped. Let's make sure we create this function. We're going to do it right below here. Make sure you prefix it, Objective-C, since it's a selector and it requires it to be exposed to the Objective-C runtime. We also want a way to let the user tap on the map. So we're going to say let gesture is a UI tap gesture recognizer. We're going to open up the constructor. We're going to say the target is self, and again the action is a selector, and we are going to create a selector down here before we put it in there, and it's going to again be prefixed Objective-C. It's going to be a function, and we're going to say did tap map, and it's going to take a parameter of gesture, which is going to be the UI tap gesture recognizer. And then over here we can say did tap map. Now that we have the gesture coming in as a parameter from the actual tap itself, and let's actually finish this gesture. So this is going to be gesture number of taps. Now I don't recall if this is assignable or not. Number of touches required should be 1. And gesture.number of taps required should be 1 as well. And then we're going to say map add gesture. And we're also going to enable the map's user interaction, which I believe is enabled by default, but just for the sake of making sure, let's just assign that to true. But now that we have the gesture in here, we want to take that location of the tap and convert it to coordinates in terms of the map in the world. So it's pretty easy to do that. We're going to say let location in view will be gesture, and we want location in view, and the view is going to be map. And then we want coordinates is going to be map, and we want to convert a location, let's see, convert, or point rather, we want to convert a point to point in something else. So let's see, we want to convert the location in view in our map, I believe. That doesn't seem right. So let's take a look at that one more time. We want to convert, let's see, is it, I believe it's off of the map, but I could be mistaken. So location in view, and yeah, it's on the map for sure. We want to convert, so let's read through this. This returns a CG point up above. So we want to convert a location, no, a rect, no. We want to convert a point to a coordinate from a view. Okay, this is what we want. So we're going to convert this location in view, and the map we want to, or the view we want to convert it from is going to be map, if I'm not mistaken, and this should give us the location. And we are going to say coordinates, and I think this gives us a CL location actually, and not the location itself. No, actually, just kidding. It gives us the CL location coordinates 2D, which, if I'm not mistaken, is what we said is our completion handler type, which is correct. So now what we can do in here is we can simply say completion optional, pass in that. Actually, I'm just kidding. What we want to do in this function is once the user taps on the map, we want to drop a pin on that location so they can visually see where they have tapped. We're going to call the completion in the send button tapped, but we also want to assign the location to a property on self. And up here, go ahead and create that property. So it'll be a private var. It'll be this type optional. And then before we can call the completion here, we want to unwrap it. The reason it starts off as optional is because we don't have a location or coordinates, and this error will go away since we've unwrapped it now. Now let's actually drop a pin on the map here. So we're going to say let pin is a MK point annotation, and we're going to say pin dot coordinates is self dot coordinates. And what we could do, so let's actually set this to coordinates, and then this can be coordinates. This just doesn't want it to be optional, which is why it's yelling at us. So go ahead and use that coordinates variable from up above. And then we want to say map add annotation, and we're going to simply pass in that pin. So I think that should be good enough. Let's add a title to this view controller. Let's say title is pick location, and let's add a background color. And we are going to say, once again, this is system background. And let's go to the chat view controller and show this view controller so we can actually see this in action. So once this is tapped, we're going to instantiate this. We are going to, say the large title mode is going to be never. This is just a UI thing. If you do always, you'll just get a larger title at the top of the screen. And finally, we're going to say navigation controller, push view controller, VC, and true. We also want to assign that completion. And this is going to say weak self selected coordinates. And in here, we can say let longitude is selected coordinates dot longitude. And this is actually a double, which is going to be slightly important for later on. And latitude is going to be the location dot latitude. So let's go ahead and print this if the user selects it. So we're going to say long equals longitude, and lat equals latitude. So go ahead and hit Command R. Let's see if we have any errors. We just have a warning here. Looks like, where do we have an error? We also have an error in here. And this is complaining. This should be map.frame. We don't want to assign the map like that. And hit Command one more time, and let's see if this works. So we're going to click on our conversation. We're going to hit this. We want to send a location, but we first want to close my antivirus pop-up. So we'll hit this. This presents a new screen. Awesome, looking good. So now we have a map. We can tap somewhere on the map and it drops a pin. So notice an issue is right now when we continuously tap, it just keeps dropping pins. So this is definitely not what we want because the user can only send one location at a time. So what we should do rather is we should either remove all the existing pins before we drop a new one, or we should use an existing pin that's on the map and just update its location. But what I want to show before I close the simulator is once we select this button, we call our completion, and there is our longitude and latitude, and this is of the most recent pin that was dropped on the map. So we just need to fix the UI to just get rid of all the prior pins. So let's see how we can do that. I actually don't remember myself, so this will be interesting. So I think we can get all of the annotations like this. Look at that, beautiful. So we can say before we actually create this new pin, we are going to iterate over the current annotations. So for annotation in, and by the way, this annotation is just a technical, I guess, term for like what you're dropping on the map. There's different kinds. There's this point one we're using, and you can create custom ones, but that's what that is. We are going to say map, and we want to remove an annotation, and go ahead and hit Command R. And now we should only have one pin at a time, because every time we tap, it's going to get rid of the prior pins. Looking good. Perfect. Awesome. And I think someone mentioned I can hold like Option to zoom into the map, but there it is. So you can hold Option on your keyboard and it'll help you zoom into the map. That's actually news to me. I never knew that after 10 years of doing this. So whoever left it in my comments, thanks to you. So now that we have the location, we need to actually send this message. So pretty easy to do that. You just want to look for in this chat view controller, wherever we're sending a current message. So we're doing that right here. So simply copy this whole bit just to be lazy about it. We're going to copy that. We don't want the URL. And we simply want to do the same thing here, but we're obviously going to change some of the variables. So the first thing we want to create here, instead of a media item, is a location, and this gets created with a location and a size. The size is irrelevant. We're going to change this at render time, so just pass in 0. The location matters though. We're going to say CL location. Open up that constructor, and we're going to use the one where we can pass in a coordinate. Just kidding, we're not going to use that one. We're going to use the one where we only have to pass in the least amount of properties and parameters. And I believe that's latitude and longitude. Let's use this one. So for latitude, pass in latitude, and longitude, pass in longitude. And those are right up here. We got that from here, what we passed in the completion handler. And let's see, now we want to send a message. We're going to send a location message, and we're going to pass in the location data. Whoops. Pass in this to this. Sent date will be the same. Message ID, and we all need all of this stuff, right? So let's go see where we did this. I think we had a function to create it as suspected. So we can copy all of this actually, and we can put that guard up here. And because this is on self, you want to make sure you use self optional. There's your message ID. You also want conversation ID, so go ahead and do self optional. Name, you want to be also self optional, and self sender, self optional. And it's self optional because this is weak self. So now we should have this data, and we're saying database manager shared, send message to conversation ID. You are passing in you're passing in other email, but you're doing it off of strong self. So we should unwrap self up here. So we are going to say guard let strong self equals self else return. We can change all these self optionals to strong self. It's basically one in the same. So go ahead and do that. And then down here, this function should be good now. We're passing in the conversation ID, the other user email, the message, the name, and all this other stuff. In our completion handler, we can leave this as is. And now we just want to go to our database manager and adjust some stuff in there, particularly in the send message function. And what you want to do in the send message function is you want to, of course, go into the location here. And it's going to have the location data. And you're going to say the message. So first of all, the location itself will be location data dot location. Notice it's not optional. And the message is going to be, we're going to do the longitude, comma, the latitude in a string. So we're going to do location dot coordinates dot longitude, and same thing again, location dot coordinates dot latitude. So now the message content in the database will be longitude, comma, latitude. The order matters here for when we go ahead and try to render this, so we don't flip them accidentally. And what else do we want? We also want to specify the kind appropriately. So let's look for that whole bit. So let's see, type. Actually, we already are doing the type because we have this extension, which I feel like I always forget I added, but that's why extensions are helpful. They're highly reusable. Let's just read through this again and make sure I didn't make any other omissions. So all this stuff should be the same. Our super long send message function, which we should probably refactor later, but I think that's all we need to do, actually. Yeah, I think that's all we need to do. So let's go ahead and hit Command R. Well, that's all we need to do to send a message, rather, I should say. We have to do the rendering side after. So let me go to Firebase here and open up your database. And I've got the conversation open, and here is the collection of messages. So we are going to hit this. We want to send a location. We're going to send, I don't know, California is pretty nice, right? So let's drop a pin in here, and let's hit send. And one thing you notice off the bat is we never dismissed this view controller, so that's not good. But if you take a look at this down here, it will say sent photo message. So that doesn't seem right to me, why we're sending a photo message. So let's go back to the chat view controller. I think we printed it out here. Yeah, this should be sent location message, failed to send location message. So even though the view controller didn't dismiss from the map, we should have properly sent our location message. So if we open this up, we can see in here we have the longitude, comma, latitude, and then we also have the kind in here for the type as location. So let's fix that dismissal of the screen as well as rendering. So the dismissal is pretty easy. Whenever we call this completion handler in the location picker, I think I called it, we simply want to dismiss this view controller. So we are going to say navigation controller, and we want to pop view controller. And you don't want to do, there's another one in here, pop to root. That will pop you all the way back to your conversation list. You just want to go back one controller. So you're going to say pop view controller animated true, and go ahead and hit Command R. Let's look at rendering, and then we'll quickly do the profile after that too. So we open this up and we notice we sent a message, but it's not rendering properly. It's kind of inferring it to be a text-based message, so that's not right. So we're going to go to our database manager, and we want to find the function that is called, what is it called? Get all messages. And in here, we do an if-else based on the type. So we're going to add a new we're going to add a new case in here, and this one is going to be else if, and what did I call it? Type, else if type is location. We are going to want to figure out what the location is. So all we get in here is the content of the message, and the content of our message is the longitude, comma, latitude. So we are going to split that by the comma. So we're going to say location components is going to be content components separated by delimiter, and the delimiter is a comma. And then what we can do is basically say let longitude equals the location components, and it's the first value as a, either we can just keep it at first value, we're not going to cast it just yet. And then the latitude, can never spell that right, latitude is going to be the second value. And now we want to create an appropriate message. So we are going to basically copy this, and we want the kind to be a location, and we're going to create a location thing up above. So we're going to say let location is location, and it takes a location and size. Size, what did we say for these ones up here? 300 by 300, that looks good to me. So let's just copy that. And this is a CL location, so what we need to do up here is import core location, so we can use that type in here. So import core location, and you want to go back to that function, which is right here. And actually, what did we miss here? That's not important. What function is this? This function is finish creating conversation. So it looks like in the function where we create a new conversation, we never actually handle the photo, video, and location message. So the stuff we do up here in send message, we probably want to do down there as well. In here, rather. Anyways, interesting. I missed that in the earlier video, but let's finish this up. So now we want to create a CL location. CL location, and we want to construct this with a longitude and latitude, which is this one, rather latitude and longitude. And these are doubles, so we are going to cast these as a double and as a double. And when we try to cast it, it might be optional, so we're going to do it in a guard. So go ahead and put those on one line. Whoops, ignore those warnings for 2 seconds. And copy that. We're going to say guard, paste. And we're going to want to add our curlies. Whoops, let me zoom out a little bit so you guys can see the whole thing. So we're going to say guard longitude is our location coordinate, the thing at the 0th element as a double. And then we also want, this one should go away. Let's see what this is complaining. These are both complaining. Cast from string to unrelated type always fails. Okay, this is complaining because we are trying to cast it directly where we should be saying this is a double. And actually, I don't even know if we need to cast it. We might have to, that's what logic says, because it might fail to cast to a double. Let's see if it gives us a warning. So it looks like we have warnings here. So it's going to say immutable value, longitude was created but never used. So that's correct. So let's pass in here the latitude and the longitude. And I think the optionality of guard using a guard unwrap here is correct, because when we try to cast the string as a double, it might fail, so it might return nil. And why is this complaining? This is complaining because we're doing a return, and we should return nil since this function, whoops. I think this whole thing is in a compact map, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, this whole thing is in a compact map, so we want to return nil. That makes sense. So here's our location. So that should be sufficient to render. So go ahead and hit Command R to build and run. Let's hit this, and we should see our location here. Look at that, awesome. So it's still loading, it's still loading, it's still loading. That's slightly annoying. Sometimes this takes a while to load. Sometimes it's super zoomed in, so it isn't very, it doesn't actually even show you anything that useful. But it uses Google Maps to load, so actually under the hood, you do have to do a little more setup if you want to use like a different type of mapping provider. You can also, for your simulator, if you want to try this on the current location, you can select the simulator and come up here to Window. Actually, they moved it. Oh no. So they might have moved it to Features. There it is, Location. And you can specify a mock location. So we can say Apple, which is Cupertino, California. And we can come in here. And let's say we want to send another location. And let's drop this pin right here. Let's hit send. And it looks like we are sending a location, but let's make sure we're reading it out correctly. So what I'll say in here is, let's actually render out, whoops, not in there. We want to do for longitude and latitude. And hopefully that order I used here is correct. I think we put it in as longitude and latitude. I'll double check. So we're going to say print rendering location long equals longitude, lat equals latitude. And let's make sure these numbers look good. So down here we can see, let's see, we don't see it in here yet because I should probably click into a conversation. That would be super helpful. And let's see where it is in this whole mess. So rendering, there it is, rendering location. And we have long equals -122 and the lat equals 42, which looks to be correct to me. And let's go to the send message and make sure we did it as longitude comma latitude, that order. So let's find send message. Let's see. So the message is location, longitude, comma, location, latitude. So it looks correct to me. As you can see over here, we have, it zooms in like a ton how much the actual location is rendered. And what we actually could do, even though I didn't really plan on it, but then again, this whole video wasn't really planned, in our chat view controller, similar to how we have a function at the very bottom here when we tap on a message, I wonder if there is a function called didTapLocation where we can open up that map viewer. Let's see. So it looks like there is no location in here. So we have a didTap background, didTap message. So let me put a breakpoint in here and let's see what happens if we tap this location message. Okay, so it looks like we don't come into there. And let's implement the other function, didTap message. I wonder why there's not a didTap location in this framework. Kind of irrelevant, but let's see if this function gets called when we tap the location. It'd be nice if we could tap it and open up the location screen. So let's go ahead and hit Command R, hit this, and let me clear this jazz out just for the sake of keeping that clean. Let's hit this, and okay, wonderful. So we come into this function. So let's get rid of this breakpoint. So what we can do in here is we first want to get our message at that position, and we actually can copy this whole thing, including the switch, because what we're going to do is we are going to show the location on the bigger screen once the user taps it. And we don't care about the video and the switch, and we don't care about the photo either. What we care about is a location message, which has a location data. And the location data, we want to grab the coordinates off of it. So we're going to say let coordinates equals location data dot location dot coordinates. And what we're going to do now is we're going to go adjust our map picker or location picker. What did I call it? Location picker controller. And we're going to adjust this to be able to take in a location from the constructor. That way we can pass in the location that the user taps on in the message. So we're going to go to that location picker, and we're going to add a custom initializer up here. So we're simply going to add init, and we are going to init with coordinates, and we can simply say these are CL location coordinates to D, and then we can say self.coordinates equals coordinates. And then if we also construct this with our own coordinates, we're going to create a new property in here, and it's going to be is pickable, or I guess is, yeah, that works, is pickable. And by default, this will be true actually. And if we pass in our own coordinates, we're going to say this is false. Make sure you call super init. And we want the super init with a nib name and bundle. It's going to yell at me for not including the required initializer, so hit this and hit fix. Somebody asked why this is needed. This is because of key coding compliance for NS coding for the decoder. It's a bit of a discussion of what that is, so I'll just leave it at that. And now what you can do is you can call this constructor with a coordinate, pass in your coordinate, and the completion handler will be nil, so we don't need to assign that. And we can say vc.title is location. We're going to have to update the other place where this location is set, and we're also going to have to update this constructor to take optional. Let's use this is pickable. So let's get rid of the title here. We'll assign the title in the caller side. We're going to say if the location is pickable, then we're going to create this send button. Otherwise, we're just presenting the location, so we don't want to have a send button. That doesn't really make too much sense. And we're also only going to add the gesture recognizer if the location is not pickable, rather is pickable. Fix that, fix that. And if the location is not pickable, so we're just showing location, we're simply going to add an annotation to the map, and that annotation will be the pre-filled coordinate that we pass in. So we're going to say guard let coordinate, just copy and paste this, equals self dot coordinate, else we're just not going to add it, and we really shouldn't be in this controller otherwise. We'll add the pin. So go ahead and hit Command B. You're going to have one error, I think. And this error is because we need to call this constructor in the present location picker with nil, because we updated the constructor. And we're going to assign the title here because we moved it from there to pick location. Go ahead and hit Command R to build and run. And we should be able to tap on a location message now. Hit this, there's our location. Let's tap it, and we see our pin there. Let's tap this one. I think the first one we sent was California. There's our pin there. So there's actually a variety of ways where you can go into the location picker, and on the map itself, what you could do, if you're in this picking state, you could set things like the region, and the region and in like span and stuff, and that will allow your map to zoom in closer to the location, so you're not looking at, the whole world here. So it's a little more contextual to where the pin is. Notice when we tap on it, we can't place a pin because we're in the viewing state and there's no send button here. So yeah, that's how you can send a location message. I really wish the message kit would render this more appropriately without us having to fix overrides. We could fix the overrides, but I'll just leave it here for now. Let's talk about the profile for a quick minute and then we'll wrap up. So the first thing you'll notice is this image loads in every time. Kind of annoying, kind of ugly. We don't show the user's name here. So let's go ahead and show the user's name and fix this image as well. So that is in the profile view controller. So the first thing that we do in here to make this image loading slightly better is let's go ahead and import SD web image. And right now when we show the image, we use our own image fetch right here, where we basically take the URL and we fetch the data and assign it. So kind of verbose. What we can rather do is we can say image view, SD set image, contents of URL, completion is nil, and you can get rid of all this stuff. So that's SD web image for you. And we actually don't even need this function. If you look where this function is called, we can simply in here just say image view dot sd set image of the URL and nil, because we're just calling this function here at this point. So get rid of that, get rid of that, and get rid of that. Hit Command R to build and run. And we should have our image loading in now, similarly to what we had before. Let's go ahead and hit Command R one more time. There's a warning I just saw up there, so we'll fix that. So the first thing you'll notice off the bat is that it is faster. We could look at caching the data. Maybe I'll talk about caching in the next video rather. Let's see why this is complaining. It's complaining because we have weak self here and we're not using it, so go ahead and get rid of that. And let's add in that name. So I believe this whole thing's a table view. Yep, so this whole thing is a table view. So what we're going to want to do is adjust the table view to take one more cell. And we have this thing called data already, and we use data.count for number of cells. We've hard-coded this to be read and such. What we should rather do is allow the cell to be configured with a view model. So let's see, what does data contain? Data is just an array of strings, it looks like at the moment, which is log out in here. So what I'm going to do is I am going to create a struct, and we're going to call it profile view model. And basically in here, what we want are a few things. The first thing that we want is let's call it type. So we're going to say profile view model type, and we'll say that, and we'll create this type up here. And this is going to be the type of cells. So I'm going to say either we have info or log out. And then we are also going to want a title for what we're going to want to show. And then what else do we want? We're also gonna, so a view model can have the data. Sometimes people like to put things like colors in it as well. I'm not a fan of that personally. So we can put it in here for now, and then we'll refactor it a little bit just to make it cleaner. So we're going to say let color will be a UI color, and we'll also say alignment. Actually, we don't even need alignment. Let's just leave that there for now. And we actually don't even need color. Scratch that, just take that out. But the thing we do need is a handler, which is going to be a closure that takes nothing and returns nothing. So go ahead and hit Command B. You should still be compiling. We are going to update this data to be a var, and we're going to get rid of logout, and we're going to say this is an array of these view models. In view.load, the first thing we want to do is we want to append a couple of view models. So we're going to say data.append, and go ahead and open up the constructor for this one. And we want to basically create the view models for each cell. The first one is going to be info, and the title is going to be name. The constructor will be a handler, which will be weak self in, and we can add a handler when the user taps on this cell and something can happen. But now that I think about it, when the user taps the name, we don't really want anything to happen. So what we could do is make this handler optional. And in this case, we can pass in nil. Now let's copy and paste this. And we want another view model, and the next one's going to be logout. The title is going to be logout. And the handler will be, for this case, weak self in, and something needs to occur when the user taps logout, obviously, and we have that implemented already. If we go down to the function of did select a row at index path, and we can actually take all of this stuff and we're going to move it to our handler for that view model. Whoops. And let me actually align these to be in the same line so it doesn't make us do weird indentation. Paste that in right there. You're going to want to unwrap strong self. And then you're going to want to use strong self, I believe, in a few places. The first place, actually, maybe just one place, actually. So we already have strong self here, strong self there. So we can say strong self present. Go ahead and hit Command B. Make sure you don't have any errors. I don't think we do. It looks like we do, actually. Let's see where this error is occurring. So this is occurring here, which is fine because our cell doesn't have, rather data doesn't have text in it anymore. So go ahead and get rid of this stuff. In did select row, we want to pull out the handler. So first we're going to say let view model will be our data and the nth thing in the collection. And we know each of these has a handler. So we could just call the handler like this, and it's optional, so we could do that. So that's perfectly valid. So let me basically just get rid of this. We don't need to even assign it. So for each view model, we're going to say if it has a handler property, which is a function, go ahead and invoke it and call it, and that'll bring the execution into here. So now if you hit Command B, we shouldn't have any errors. But we now need to use this view model to configure our cell. So for that, what we're going to do is we're going to create a subclass of a cell. And let's see if I can get away with doing it right in this class. So we can do class profile table view cell is a UI table view cell. And what we can say in here is public func setup with view model, profile view model. And the first thing we want to do in here, we're going to switch on the view model dot the type. If we are in an info cell, we want to do some stuff. And otherwise, if we're in a logout cell, we want to do some stuff. And the stuff is all layout related, hence the name view model. So for logout, we are going to say self.textLabel.text is going to be logout. Self.textLabel.textColor is going to be red. Self.textLabel.textAlignment will be centered. And what else? Actually, we don't even want to say this is logout. What we could do is we can move this stuff here because our view model, I think, has a title property. So we can do that, looking good. And then For the info type, we can say self.textLabel.text alignment is left. This is redundant since it's left by default, but just so you guys can visualize that we're moving the view logic into the view, we are going to want to add a static constant on this class for the identifier. Now we can go ahead and register this identifier and use it with our table. So come all the way up here, look for that table view we declared, which is right here. We used a force unwrap since it is a outlet, it appears to be. So let's go ahead and say table view. We want to register this class for this identifier. And now we can adjust the self row at index path to basically try to dequeue this cell with that identifier as this profile table view cell. And now we have access to that setup function, and we can pass in our view model. So where the heck is our view model? Well, let's create it. So let's say our view model is the nth element in the collection, like that. So go ahead and hit Command B. Hopefully I've got everything. So this is essentially just a very simple vanilla table view cell. The only thing that we changed in our subclass is we added this new setup function. So go ahead and hit Command R and let's see what we get. All right, if we click this, if you look at that, the logout looks the same, but now we have this name. We refactored this to allow us to pass in view models in a more modular, flexible way. It's a much better design practice and standard to split out these objects in this fashion, but what you'll notice is we don't show the name here, so that's not exactly what we want. So in our view model construction, which is in view.load right here, for the title, we're not going to just pass in name. We're going to say name, and we are going to interpolate user default standard. We want value for key name as a string. And if this is nil, we're going to say no name. And just for the sake of kind of demonstrating how this view model allows us to scale this, let's also have a row for the email address, because we do have the user's email now that I think about it. So we can say email, and this is going to be user default value for their email. And if they don't have an email, which they really shouldn't at any point in time, since we save it on every login, we're going to say no email. Go ahead and hit Command R to build and run. And now we have the name here as well as the email. So we can spend time and watch, figure out how to align this to the right and change the colors and all that stuff. I think it's a little irrelevant for now. But this is our basic profile. Notice we can still select these cells, which I don't really like. So what I'm going to do in the view model usage in the setup function, we can actually change this to be self.selection style to be none. And this is why doing all of your view stuff in a subclass of a view based on some type of object like a view model is really, really nice. So now when we tap it, these are just info cells, so they shouldn't be tappable, but our logout is still tappable and still fully functional. So there you guys have it. That's how you guys can support dark mode, bring in location messages, and hook up your profile. That said, if you haven't smashed that like button down below already, make sure to do so for the YouTube algorithm. Helps out a lot, helps me make more videos for all of you. While you're at it, hit subscribe if you haven't done so already. Comment down below if you have any questions, errors, comments, concerns. I love hearing from you guys. I try to reply pretty soon. That said, I will see you in the next part.